Now, there's a lot of deaths in Game of Thrones, obviously, and they're all a bit sad. I was stunned when Ned got his head chopped off in season 1. But without doubt, the biggest death that just ended me was Hodor. Oh. I literally watched it last night and was in pieces. Like, I had to go and do something else. I had to watch some like puppies on YouTube for a bit because it just is the worst, most harrowing experience because yes, we've had characters sacrifice themselves for others in this, but it's the combination of him slowly getting torn to pieces by the White Walkers. It's the flashback of him hold the door into Hodor back in the day. And it's one of the lasting shots which really hit me the hardest is him, getting the arms are slowly coming through the door and killing him. And he's just watching Bran get pulled off into the distance by Mira. Not like that. I didn't mean pulled off like that. Dragged elsewhere by Mira. I've ruined all the solemnness of this now. Hodor.
It was at the end of season 4 with the Brienne and the Hound fight. Because season 4 was the first season I'd actually watched live. Like all the other big moments so far, all the big deaths, I'd kind of had spoiled for me. So I knew that the Red Wedding was coming. I knew that Ned Stark was getting his head chopped off. But I did not know the outcome to this fight, and I didn't kind of want to know because when those two characters are fighting, you spent the entire season coming around to the Hound. And at that time, Brienne was my favourite character of all time across any programme ever. I don't know why, just had a thing for Brienne. I don't know why.
I can really see that as well.
So I didn't want either of them to go. And like, none of them, all season's been built into this because Brienne has been looking for Arya. The Hound and Arya have obviously had this bond, although they don't kind of really like each other. And the fight itself is so visceral and so intense and so raw. And you just feel every single punch. And I wanted none of them to have to go, but obviously the Hound has to go, although he doesn't really. When he's sort of like on his deathbed on the side of the hill, and he's like shouting at Arya and trying to get her to put him out of his misery, he's just saying the most vile things you can think of. And she just sort of like looks at him and just sort of walks off either way and leaves him there. And I was devastated for everyone involved. We said on the podcast the other day, no one comes out of that well, not even Pod, who's just kind of stood there watching the whole thing unfold. Even he has a crappy time, and everyone's just miserable, and I was as well. Just devastated, gone. Gonzo.
Every so often, Game of Thrones, I feel like, has to remind you that it's Game of Thrones. And nothing is sort of off limits for Game of Thrones. We've seen massive main characters die. We've seen entire families slaughtered, Red Wedding and that. And I feel like for a while in season 5, we got a bit comfortable. And then Game of Thrones threw a bit of a curveball at us. And that was when Melisandre just decided that, the army's starving. The only thing to do is to burn Stannis' daughter Shireen at the stake as an offering to the Lord of Light. Apparently that was the only thing left that they could possibly do. And they do it! They actually do it! And this kid is literally burning alive, screaming for her mum and dad. And it is honestly, I've just rewatched it there, it is the most devastating scene. It is horrific. And you don't actually think, right, they're not actually gonna kill this 10-year-old child, are they? But they do, it's crazy. I'm proper sad that happened. I love Davos. One of my favorite characters in Game of Thrones is Davos, the Onion Knight. And I just love him. Why are you all laughing at me? I'm pouring my heart out here.
You get that nickname, don't you?
Ogres are like Davos. But no, he's lovely. I love him so much. His relationship with Shireen is so pure and lovely, and she teaches him how to read, and he makes her a wee stag, and then she gets burned, and then he finds the stag. Oh, Game of Thrones, man. I hope we get something like that in season 8 because I feel like we didn't really get.
Yeah,
do you know? No. Hear me out. We didn't really get anything like that in season 7. I mean, there was some things. But that's Game of Thrones for you. It breaks your heart, but you love it.
So I'm going to talk about the very first one. It's been mentioned a couple of times already, but Ned Stark's death has to be the most devastating moment that shook me the most, just because everything else in Game of Thrones, you have this inbuilt dread that something horrible is going to happen because they just decided to chop off Ned Stark's head at the end of season 1 and prove that this is the most legit series ever, that they don't give a shit and they're going to murder everyone you care about, and any investment you have is going to be just thrown away to the side as a headless corpse, and that's how the rest of your life now. That's what it's going to be. But yeah, the Ned Stark death scene is one of the most intense things that TV threw out. And defined Game of Thrones for what it is. And as soon as you hear Joffrey and see his smug little stupid face go, but they have the soft hearts of women, and then actually decide that Ned Stark's gonna go, yeah, no, it was one of the most, yeah, I'm not describing this very well. So Arya's there, his daughter, both his daughters are going to watch him die. So Arya's in the crowd and Sansa's on the plinth thing. And you think the whole way through that they're going to find a way to stop it from happening, that this big sword comes out. They're not actually going to kill Ned. They're not actually going to commit to killing off Sean Bean again. He's got to survive some actual episode or series. But yeah, no. The fact that they actually go through with it and end on it, and you see the birds fly away in the distance as Arya's looking up, and yeah, that's just the beginning of the end, isn't it? The beginning of 8 seasons of pain was this moment, the defining moment of Game of Thrones.
So, everybody keeps saying about characters who died, and that's all very sad. But most of the characters who have, including Hodor, earned their death in some way, so they deserved to die, or they, like, in Hodor's case, he didn't deserve to die. I'm not saying that for 1 minute before you get me in the comments. His death was a release. It was good that he died because his life was pretty shit. He had to carry around a boy all the time. He got dropped for an entire season just because. It was good that he died, basically.
It's a cry for help.
It is. Even the Red Wedding, Rob made all those mistakes, and everybody there had to die because of what he did. It's just what happens in Game of Thrones. But in Hardhome, there's a lovely character who's in it for a grand total of 1 episode called Carsey, who's one of the wildlings. And she is basically the mouthpiece for the wildlings when Jon goes to Hardhome to meet them. And at first she's suspicious of him. She says she doesn't want to put her family in danger. She doesn't want to forget they're dead because the crows killed several members of her family. And then she comes round to him and she sort of sees him as a beacon of hope. It's like, oh no, that's not going to end well. And then they go to flee. They join up with Jon Snow's forces. And then the Night King comes along and just wrecks absolutely everything. This is the point where Game of Thrones turned it up to 11 and just went mental. So you have, it's one of those awful things. It's a action movie cliche where somebody's like, got a girl at home, here's a picture of her, look how hot she is. I'm gonna go home, get married to her. Carsey does this, she's like, she puts her 2 young kids on a boat, sends them off and she's like, see you in a bit, nothing bad's gonna happen. And then she turns around and starts fighting all the wildlings, and it's like, sorry, not the wildlings, the whites. It's like she's a legitimate badass. Kills several of them with no difficulty whatsoever. And then, because it's Game of Thrones, they drop in a bunch of dead kids. It's like, oh, so that's where we are now. And they eat her. She can't bring herself to kill them because she's got kids. And then she dies, and it's just like right in the heart.
Right, so a bit of backstory to this. King's Landing is a cesspit of horrible people, and nothing good happened there. Season upon season upon season, it was all horrible. It's where Ned died, it's where Joffrey did all this stuff. It was just misery upon misery upon misery. But the one sprouting flower in all of King's Landing was Tyrion and Shae. It was the one pure thing underneath everything else going on in the background, and they had this lovely romance, and they'd met, and it was the one pure thing the show had all the way through. And then as we go further and further on, we get to the whole Joffrey's death, and they put Tyrion on trial, and still, the love still comes together. But Tyrion realizes, as you would in these situations, that she is almost certainly going to be killed because of their romance, that is not safe for her, and he knows that she will never ever leave his side. So he just tells her everything he can to make her go away. He says, oh, you're nothing to me but a whore, I never really loved you, I'm just using you in all this, it's the only thing you're good for, to desperately try and get her. He breaks her heart into a million pieces because her hating him
is better than her being killed for loving him. But that's not the devastating moment. He has his trial, and they bring her out as a character witness, and she's obviously believed everything he said and comes back on him.
I was his whore.
That's louder.
I was his whore.
You see what I mean? That still gets me hearing it even now, because he's done such a good job in protecting her that she's hated him so much for doing it, and now she's being used to send him to death, probably. But that's not the devastating moment. He finally gets his escape. Jaime breaks him out of prison, and on his way out, who does he see? In his own father's bed. Shae. He's done such a good job of protecting her. He's made her hate him so much. She's gone straight into the arms of the father who was trying to murder him. And in the ensuing heart-wrenching scuffle, he kills her. And that is the bit where he sat on the floor and she's there. That is, of all the deaths and all the horrible moments he did in the show, that is the one that really broke me. I was like, I can't believe I've just watched that. And you don't blame him, because it's so confusing and it's so complicated. You don't blame him for doing it, and you don't blame her at the same time either. That's just what Game of Thrones does to you. That's what Westeros has done to the only pure love the show's ever really allowed to develop. And yeah, when he puts one in his dad's gut for calling her a whore, a dead whore, that's just, oh, that felt good. I felt like that bow when he did that. I felt like he'd released me straight into him. So there you go. That's my moment.
Red Wedding. Sad, innit?